Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about a topic that's very close to my heart. So let's get started. Starting out, my name is Violet, and I solve problems, mostly problems relating to web development. I've worked in this field since 2012, when I graduated from college with my degree in Spanish literature. So, that makes sense, right? After I graduated, I stuck around in town for 7 months, and that was when I got started with my first full-time development job. I was part of a 3-person team, and all of us did back-end, front-end, and our own design. So, started off wearing a lot of different hats. After that, I moved to New York City to be a front-end developer at an energy efficiency startup. This time I was part of a 6-person team, but I was the only front-end web developer. Everyone else worked on software or databases, so I had friends, but I was also kind of alone there. And at that point, my job was making tiny static sites and rolling out new features on our actual product site, and I built a Shopify store once, and then at some point I also became the startup's iOS developer. Which was new to me, so again, more skills there. And after about 2 years of that, I moved completely across the country to Portland, Oregon for a job at a creative agency called Instrument. And there, the sheer amount of things that I've worked on and the amount that I've learned has taken off, so I'm not even trying to fit it onto that slide. So to start with, over the past 4 years, I've got to expand the companies that I've been able to work with. I've done work with tech startups, with museums, with sportswear companies, nonprofits, kind of you name it, I've done some project in that field. I've helped create style guides and component libraries. I've made interactive installations and museum labels. I've made websites with 5 pages or with tens of thousands. Sometimes I work alone, other times I've been one of 7 developers. And on top of all of that, my role has been dynamic. Sometimes I've stayed on as an individual contributor, focused on building out the project. Other times I've been the tech lead, managing goals, making technical decisions, and supporting the team. So clearly, I love variety. But amidst all of this craziness, the one constant is that my work keeps getting more interesting. I've always got a new challenge to take on, a new way to create and be creative, and that's right where I want to be. But the point is that no single technical thing is the reason why I enjoy being a developer, and no one thing has carried me to this point in my career. Except for one thing, which is problem solving. For me, this means defining challenges, inventing solutions, finding connections, and getting a little better each time. Independent problem solving underlies pretty much all the work I've done, and most likely yours as well. Because above all else, we are creative problem solvers. We do specialize. We become experts in interaction, in performance, and typography. We lose ourselves in color theory and stack traces, but we're more than those individual things. Our true strength lies in the fact that we think creatively. We find answers, we figure things out, and we evolve. As such, problem solving is a core competency of every single person in this room. So my goal today is to lay out for you some things that took me years to piece together for myself. We're going to do 2 things. We're going to redefine independence and look at a framework for independent problem solving. So let's start out by looking at what independence actually is. For me, it's most useful to think of independence as the ability to construct and understand solutions. I say construct because these acts take generative work. That work itself may happen in the moment, or it may be prefaced by decades of experience. But understanding problems and understanding oneself doesn't happen without effort. Likewise, we talk about finding solutions, but we don't usually find an entire fix to a problem. Maybe we discover pieces of a solution, but like problems, we need to purposely bring them into being. Notice that the definition of independence says nothing about working alone or not needing help. Seeking help is actually an essential part of problem solving, as we'll see later. Similarly, being independent doesn't mean that you always know the answer or never need a do-over. What matters is that through all of it, you're able to understand, expand, and improve. So that's independence. Let's move on to the actual act of independent problem solving. How can we think about this, and how can we be most effective as we're doing it? One thing to note about what I'm going to talk about is that these are all mental and behavioral strategies. As we go through these, some strategies may feel familiar or resonate with you. They may already be part of your process, and that's wonderful. For anything unfamiliar, the aim is for you to understand the value of this strategy and incorporate it into your practice. Over time, these strategies and tactics will become second nature. So, independent problem solving fits into 3 broad recommendations. Have a plan, be honest, and use your tools. Within each of these categories, we're going to look at specific ways to level up our independence and effectiveness. So let's start with planning. Everything's got to have a plan, right? When something new and exciting comes along, it can be tempting to dive right in and just start trying things. This can work, but it doesn't really help us deliver consistent results or learn over time. So, before starting work, we should make a plan of how to tackle the problem. And before we can even make a plan, we should check that we actually understand the problem that we're trying to solve. As mathematician George Polya puts it, it is foolish to answer a question that you do not understand. So let's begin by building our understanding. Let's clarify what the problem is, check our assumptions, and ask all the questions possible. So here are some ways to check for and expand how you understand a problem. Begin by looking at the data you're given. What do you know, and what other information would you like to have? Next, check the unknown. Clearly articulate what problem needs solving. Once you've looked at these, look at the condition. What else does our solution need to do? What other boxes should it check? This is a great place to involve your teammates, who may have a different understanding of the problem or a different context. Asking these questions as a group ensures that everyone is in agreement about the work being done. At Instrument, understanding is so important that most projects begin with 3 to 8 weeks during which we don't actually work on the deliverable at all. Instead of immediately going and working, it's our job during this discovery phase to interview stakeholders, clarify client needs, and reach agreement on the project's larger goals. And this actually does take 8 weeks a lot of the time. But it ensures that when we do start working, we're making something that everyone actually wants. So we understand our goal, and now it's time to create a plan. This is probably familiar to most of us on some level. We might track tasks and to-dos on Post-its or in a ticketing system or what have you. But one way to level up the humble to-do list is by, for each step, estimating how long it will take and establishing that step's sign of progress. A sign of progress is a way to know that you've advanced towards your goal. For a step on your checklist, how do you know that it worked or that you brought the solution closer to completion? For example, and this is not real code, the programming methodology of test-driven development is centered around signs of progress. The way test-driven development works is that before writing any actual code, you write tests describing the behavior you want your code to ultimately have. So here's some pseudocode for making a dog. We want the dog to go woof when it barks, and we want it to be a good boy. For now, both of these tests will fail since we haven't started coding the dog yet. But once we add the proper bark functionality, the first test goes from failing to passing. The passing test is a very clear sign of progress that we're on the right track. And once we've written the code so that every test passes, we know that we've reached our goal. Okay, so now we've got our plan, we understand the problem, and we have our signs of progress. But I mentioned this thing about honesty, so where does that fit in? Honesty is extremely important when you are actually solving a problem. Having a plan, even a great one, doesn't mean that carrying out that plan will be quick or easy. So as you work, check in with yourself and be realistic. Is this step taking as long as you thought that it would? Are you seeing real signs of progress? And lastly, how are you feeling about that step or about your solution in general? By asking yourself these questions and checking in frequently, you can avoid spinning on one minute aspect of the task, or by straying off into a similar but actually unrelated problem. You also build mindfulness around your own work habits, and these check-ins will become easier as you examine your habits more closely. In executing a solution, this is also a time to be very honest with your team. And I'm going to say the quotes below, one at a time, and I'd like you to repeat after me, okay? Because these can be hard to say in the moment, and I want to give you some practice. So, I am having trouble solving this. I am going to need more time. I will try a different approach. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So right now you are way ahead of me, because it took me 4 or 5 years to become even vaguely comfortable with expressing that I was having trouble, which in hindsight was not productive. But the secret is, managers love it when you tell them that you're having trouble. They love it when you're able to go to them and tell them that something is wrong and tell them what you need to overcome that thing. It's proactive, it's good information for them to have, and it shows that you care about the project and not about looking perfect. So now that we've got that down, we've come to the last aspect of problem solving, using your tools. By this, I mean, look to connect what's happening now with things you have already seen or already know. Mobilize your knowledge, find parallels, and this can guide you towards new steps and solutions. So there are 3 extremely helpful ways to leverage outside knowledge and experience: by changing modalities, finding a related problem, and asking for help. Changing modalities simply means switching up the medium that you're using. We spend a lot of time in a mouse, keyboard, screen triangle, and while these tools are amazing, they can also trap us into the same perceptions and thought patterns over and over. If we're having trouble thinking something through or finding an alternate route, it might be time to express those ideas another way. Writing something on paper instead of typing it can work wonders. For me, I love drawing pictures, and I often work through problems visually on a whiteboard before taking that back to my computer to type up. Switching modalities helps awaken dormant associations and analogies, so something that's hard to express in words might be really easy to show spatially. Something that's easy to miss on a computer screen can completely stand out if it's written longhand. So one classic modality change is rubber ducking. In programming, rubber ducking is a debugging tactic where you narrate every single thing that your code is doing or every single thing that you're trying out. What's weird is that it works whether you're talking to another skilled programming colleague or a literal rubber ducky sitting on your desk, which is where the term comes from. Was a guy with a rubber ducky. So the effectiveness of this technique does not come from getting real feedback. It comes simply from being forced to vocalize your ideas and to do it linearly. Assumptions, mistakes, and subtleties that you can miss when you're typing and reading are suddenly super apparent. Apart from changing modalities, finding a related problem is a great way to bring fresh knowledge into your current task. So all problems are related to each other in some way, even if in the moment it doesn't feel like it. These problems are wonderful because you've seen a related problem before and may actually have solved it. When you find a related problem, this can deepen your understanding of the current problem. A related problem can suggest steps to take or signs of progress. It can point to an alternate solution or illuminate domain-specific knowledge. So, how do you know if 2 problems are related? Well, you can search for a related problem by asking questions similar to the questions we were asking at the beginning when we were trying to understand a single problem. So basically, problems can be related to each other through their data, unknown, or conditions. So for instance, data-wise, a sidebar built in React might have information applicable to an image gallery built in React. Unknown-wise, building a footer might have applicable learnings to building a header, since they both solve navigation needs. And having made an e-commerce site can actually help you build a blog if they both need to satisfy the condition of working without JavaScript. And if this all sounds like a bit much, the good news is that as you gain experience, you'll have more and more solutions to look back on and use as related problems. Taking on a wide variety of challenges, especially early in your career, can help build up this stock of related problems to refer to later. And as you work through these problems, you'll start being able to notice and leverage patterns everywhere. And you don't only need to rely on your own experience. There are ways of bringing others' experience to the table. So asking for help is where we are now. And this can work wonders, but getting comfortable with it can also be very difficult. So here we're going to look at some tactics for seeking help. And they aim to structure how you look for help, build your confidence, and to make it easier for others to help you as well. So before we dive into the specifics, I want to tell you a secret that is so secret that a bunch of the talks today have already highlighted it. But I'm going to say it again because it can't be said enough. If you get comfortable asking for help, you will be way ahead of so many of your more senior colleagues. For a variety of reasons, societal and personal, people just don't ask for help and they get used to life that way. If independence means that you don't need help, it follows that seeking help means you are not independent. Needing help, admitting that you can't do something alone, can feel like admitting that you've failed. I know because I've suffocated under that weight. So here's what I wish I'd known earlier. Seeking help shows self-knowledge in that you are aware of your own limits. While you should be challenging yourself, you're not magic, and you won't gain omniscience through the same repeated struggle. Asking for help shows that you respect colleagues and their expertise, and most importantly, it shows that you value solving the problem at hand over preserving your own ego. This factor is incredibly important to your manager especially, and it shows that you can be depended on. So first, let's establish some of the really helpful things that you can get out of seeking help. First, if someone has solved a very similar problem, you may straight up be able to reuse their solution and tailor the specifics to your situation. You can also use others' experience as a way to find related problems and to challenge your own assumptions. Lastly, some things are just really hard to isolate or Google, so asking another person can be the best way forward in a reasonable time frame. So for a personal example, here is a picture of me not asking for help. I don't know if you can tell from the photo, but when this was taken, I was completely freaking out on the inside. So long story short, we were setting up an installation the day before an event, and for some reason, I actually still don't know why, an animation that had worked completely fine through months of development and testing was suddenly dropping frames all over the place. It was choppy, it was extremely obvious, and it looked terrible. It was my animation, so went my logic, it was on me to fix it, but I had no idea why it was happening. So I set myself apart from my other 6 teammates, and I just Googled things over and over. Which again, in retrospect, not a great move. So I Googled everything I could think of, and I was just panicking that this was it, I was never gonna get it working again, I was gonna get fired. I was wondering if my parents would let me move back in with them while I looked for another job. And then a colleague wandered over, glanced at what was going on and suggested one line of CSS that I had never even heard of before. This was the line, by the way, if you want to take photos of this slide. Very applicable learning. Anyway, so the moral is that if I'd asked for help earlier, maybe this photo would have been of me eating nachos or hanging out with my coworkers, but instead it's me, and I'm tense and worried and alone. So I just want to maximize your nachos and your hangouts and minimize your amount of worry. All right, so sold you on asking for help. So who are good people to seek help from? So honestly, pretty much everyone. Teammates and coworkers may have insight into your specific situation or into company standards and prior work. Special interest communities can help you get deep expertise on narrow topics. Slack groups are amazing for this. For example, I'm a member of an accessibility Slack group, and the other people in it are either experts or at least care a lot. So the discussion and knowledge sharing there is invaluable. And I encourage you to find and engage with, as you can, specific groups that correspond to your interests. The goal, to borrow a metaphor from Lara Hogan, is to build a Voltron. Meaning, you should strive to build up a mental database of people who you know can help you with various topics. For example, right now my Voltron includes coworkers who can help me with accessibility, technical design documents, TypeScript, and more. And now that you know who to go to, when should you go to them? Some amazing moments for asking for help are when you're unable to complete a step in your plan, if you're not seeing an expected sign of progress, or if when you're carrying out a solution, you realize that you need to completely rethink your plan. Okay, this is a little wordy, but this is one of my rules of thumb for seeking help. If I'm pretty sure that someone I know has dealt with the exact thing I'm trying to solve, I ask for help very early on. They probably won't need to take too much time to think or to think very hard at all, and will likely be able to copy-paste some code and send it over to me. On the other hand, if I'm pretty sure that no one in my usual group has done something similar, I'll work on it longer before seeking help. In this case, giving me help will be a larger investment of time and effort for that person, and I want to make it worth their while. Which leads me to the last part of this strategy, how to go about asking for help. So these are guidelines, not hard and fast rules, but they do make it easier for others to help you. First, it helps to give context. Some questions are fine to ask with no preamble, but most of the time it helps to know why you're here in the first place. This helps colleagues understand your position and make better recommendations. Sometimes, and this happens to everyone, you're so lost that you just need general guidance or general wayfinding on some topic. But most of the time, there is some specific question that you're trying to get to the bottom of, and it's to your advantage to ask that question. Listing out what you've already tried or are trying cuts down on back and forth and helps others target their advice better. So this way they won't suggest things that you've already attempted. And lastly, it's just nice to end with a thank you. This will keep the virtuous cycle going by showing others that their time is appreciated. As a corollary, especially as a junior member of an organization, asking for help can be a really effective way to create cultural change in the organization, even if you might not have a lot of sway or be super high up on the totem pole yet. So put that in your pockets. And with those pointers on asking for help, that actually wraps up problem solving. So have a plan, be honest, use your tools. And those are the best skills that any of us in this field can develop. And I hope you're able to bring those skills into your own work and your own practice. As you gain experience solving problems, you'll be able to push harder on your own boundaries and open up new creative possibilities for yourself. So thanks so much. Again, you got this. I'm excited to see how you grow and how you create. So say hi, shoot me an email, come work with me. And in the meantime, happy problem solving.